How's it going, Lorcas? It's Lyn here of the Lorca tribe, and it is time for us to talk about Lyn the Emblem Ring. Where she is good, where she is bad, and why she is so cool. So what are the overall uses of Lyn? Like, what does she do for a unit? She increases your speed, which is very useful for doubling or avoiding getting doubled, as well as increasing avoid rate. She also scales dex a little bit, and to some degree res. She gives Alacrity and Speed Taker, both of which can allow you to double more consistently from getting kills, and then attack something twice before it counterattacks with Alacrity. She can call doubles, which creates 4 clones that have 1 HP that enemies love to prioritize because they can one-round them. Now, I'll talk about doubles later, but doubles are actually very good for enemy phase. And then you have Astra Storm, which allows you to poke enemies at range, and in some cases, one-round them on certain units or with certain weapons. So, okay. So that's the overall use case, right? Like speed stacking, sniping things from really far away, creating doubles. So now that you know that, you have a better idea as to which units want to run Lyn. But let's move on to the stat increases. So Lyn's stat increases are in dex, speed, and res. Generally speaking, I find that Lyn is best used for snowballing a unit's speed more so than the dex. However, she can be used to increase dex for improving hit rates, for slightly improving crit rates, and for improving trigger rates of specific abilities like Luna or Sandstorm, or Ignis, or Void Grasp. You can pick whichever one is your favorite. The actual values cap out at +4 dex, +5 speed, and +3 res. And when you have bond level 10, you get +2 dex, +3 speed, and +2 res. So you really need to complete her Paralog before you start seeing huge gains in base speed. But before that, you can still get a reasonable, +3 speed, which is going to help. So definitely do her Paralog. I do recommend doing it as early as possible if you have enemy phase units that can tank, so that you can start clearing out those archers, or even just bonded shield a bunch of them, and that'll be pretty effective. But completing it early is nice because then you can get crazy speed. You can also get things like Alacrity ++, and that's pretty nice. Essentially, if you can double something, which with Lyn is pretty achievable, you will always hit it twice before it hits you. So it allows you to kill things without getting counterattacked, more or less. So Lyn's Paralog can be quite difficult if you aren't prepared for it or you don't know what to expect. Essentially, it is a map with a ton of archers on it. And this can prove challenging for teams with a lot of flyers. You do have Bonded Shield, though, when you do this. So if you don't have a ton of emblems, you can beat this map with just Bonded Shield, like in this position, and then like tanks in this position, and you can like push in here. I'll go over like basic map tactics so you have a good idea as to how to beat it. The first thing I would do is, if you don't want to do this early or right away, you can do this by like chapter 15, 16, so you don't have to do it right away. If you do want to do it right away, you're going to want tanks, whether they be avoid tanks or just physical tanks. The enemies don't have a lot of damage, so they hit like 32, 33 damage, and the longbows only hit 26. So if you have high enough physical defense, you can tank these pretty easily, and you can kill a lot of them with like a tomahawk or whatever weapon you want to use, whatever like 2-range weapon you want to use on your tanks, whether it be daggers, tomahawks, javelins. Now, if you can double these on counterattack and tank, that's huge. Their speed is 19 to 20, so you want to have dudes that are a little bit fast so that you can double them. You also be mindful there is a Mystic right here. The damage isn't that crazy, though, and the speed isn't that good, so if you have a Thief in a tree, like you can actually just put just a Thief in a tree here, and as long as the enemies have hit rate, you can usually tank it. So assuming they have at least like 1% hit rate or greater, they will still attack you. However, just be mindful that you can still catch a 1% hit and die. And if 5 things are attacking you and they're like 5 to 10% hit rate, you could eat lethal damage. So I prefer physical tanking over avoid tanking. It's more consistent, especially if you use Ike. An Ike tank here is fantastic and just takes like 2 damage per enemy per combat and kills or almost kills them. So the way this map works is each one of the tent units, if not killed, will spawn 4 additional units per tent when Lyn attacks, specifically when she starts moving and when she uses Astrostorm. That is the trigger. So you can actually avoid her and bait her and get her to go to like certain sides of the map as she chases units to Astrostorm and then start cleaning up these dudes. The way I generally push this map is I have units tank here or on this tree. So you can have a bonded shield user in the tree and then the bonded target here. So just 2 units if you want. And they can completely hold down this front. You can have your other forces pull one of these or pull 2 of these with chain guards, with tanking, with whatever tools you want to use. And generally you want to route these. They'll start approaching you. These will approach you. This group down here, you want something that can deal with these, with wyverns, because they're about to get attacked by these as well. So usually 1 or 2 of these goes this way. These start approaching, and then they attack you. The next turn, you can pull this one. You can just have a tank move down to like here to pull it and counterattack with like Wormslayer or something. Well, maybe not Wormslayer. Wormslayer with Chain Guard or Magic with Chain Guard is totally fine. And then these dudes will push, and you'll have some of these other units kill this and maybe this, and then these will probably go this way. So the Bonded Shield can kill these, no problem. That's like the easiest way to do it. And then you can have like physical tanks up here, reunite these, I would say, and then start pushing in here, clearing these out. And you can also do stuff like warp or rescue if you have it. So you could like warp in, you could like fly over on a healer or on a wyvern and then pull it back with a healer. That could be pretty useful. You can also just reunite all of your forces like over here and start pushing down this way, kill these dudes, and then once Lyn attacks, just dive her. That's probably the easiest way to beat this map, and just ignore all the extra reinforcements, because she'll start moving up. And once she gets, like, you can kind of hold this corner here. Once she gets to here and uses Astrostorm, you can then dive her. And she can't use Astrostorm every turn. She can use it every other turn. So yeah, there's some tactics for you. Let's talk about Lyn's weapons now. Her emblem weapons. All right, her first emblem weapon is Killer Bow. Now, this thing, you know, it's a killer bow. It gets increased crit rate. So you can see it gets a little bit, like plus 30. Very standard. It's pretty light. Similar weight to Elfire, so it'll generally double things. One nice thing about this is the fact that you can pull a bow out on any unit, so you don't necessarily need dedicated archers. So immediately when running Lyn, you have bow access. The next weapon, oh yeah, so this weapon in particular, it's kind of on the weaker side. Without upgrading its power by doing relay trials and getting all those dumb crystals. I call them dumb crystals because I'm not a fan of relay trials. I feel like it's a waste of time. It's going to be on the weaker side. It'll generally only be good on... It'll only be good at killing flyers, really. Next we have the Manicotti. So, has a little bit of crit rate on it. You know, 20 crit. It's effective cavalry armored, which is nice. So it's kind of like a rapier. It's basically like a rapier with some crit. Personally, I don't find this very useful or that good, but you could use it if you have the base like strength to hit really hard and you just need like an effective weapon against these types. So you could use it as a rapier in this way. This one, the Mulagir, this one is good. First of all, it gives you speed +5. That's huge. It's also effective against dragons, and that's really nice because it just allows you to one-shot most wyverns. And you can also snipe wyverns from across the map. You can snipe things from across the map in general with Astrostorm, but this has more might than the Killer Bow, and it has effective dragon, which is very nice. It's also lightweight. It also has some avoid on it because it gives you speed, and speed equals avoid. But getting +5 speed, you know, if you're a fast unit, or you're at the same speed as another flyer, and you want to double them, like you can't one-shot them, this enables that. But yeah, pretty solid. The only really good weapon, in my opinion, is Mulagir, which requires the bond level to be, I think, like 15, so you have to do a Paralog. The other ones are just okay. They're situationally useful. Killer Bow, in my opinion, is just like the placeholder until you get this thing, because you have higher base damage on your Astra Storm. Now you can use other bows with Astra Storm. It doesn't have to be just these two. But for units who don't use bows, this is, you know, the best thing in her kit, in my opinion. So who are some good units or characters to use with Lyn? I'm not going to call it specific characters, I'll just generalize, because Lyn doesn't specifically do something that specific characters benefit from, aside from if you have average or higher speed, she puts you within doubling range, or in some cases she allows you to snipe things from across the map. Maybe in some cases you could use her on tanky units and create doubles, so that instead of the tank getting attacked, the doubles get attacked, but then you're not really enemy phasing very well because you're not dealing a lot of damage, but you could use that to delay enemies and to stall them out. So there is some potential there for like serious body blocking. But outside of that, I would say generally you just want to run Lyn on any unit who you want to double, but is either slightly too slow or like somewhat slow. If they're like a general, for example, it's going to be hard to get their speed up even with the speed Lyn provides and Speed Taker. So pretty much most units can benefit. Generally, it's going to be this: combat units who want speed. That's it. It's really that simple. I don't think there's some specific build that Lyn enables that justifies putting her on a particular unit. So any unit can really use her. Like Chloe's been on bond rings this whole time, and she still doubles consistently, for example. So you don't necessarily need Lyn to double. Like a build like this is perfectly fine. Lance Power, Speed Taker. Anna, in this case, is making use of Lyn so that she can run Sword Power and then Speed +5, which she'll get eventually. So there's that. And then, you know, I could run Lyn on one of my tanks. It's not going to make them tank better, though, so like I'd rather have something else. So it's really just used for combat units and speed fixing, in my opinion, or for sniping. So if you have some specific build that uniquely leverages Lyn in a specific way, I'm interested in hearing it. But as far as I can tell, the main use case of Lyn is just speed fixing. Because, like, I'm assuming this, right? I'm assuming the unit who's using her is going to be able to one-round things. So if you just have a use case where it creates a unit that one-rounds things, that's kind of implied. Like, that's what I'm assuming is the case. Like, it's going to one-round things. All right. So what are good classes or class types for Lyn? Now, Dragon is interesting because you get an extra double. So instead of getting 4, you get 5. So that's kind of interesting. You also get range +5 on the Astra Storm, which is kind of nice. So any Dragon class has some... Now, is an extra double really going to matter much? It's more lightning rods for enemies to attack, and it's also more damage when you attack because each one of these doubles is a chain attack, so you get 5 instead of 4 chain attacks. So it matters a little bit. I think a lot of the Dragon bonuses are kind of overhyped, to be honest. But Dragon type is okay. I would say any class that needs some speed fixing that's kind of durable, kind of tanky. Let's go through. All right, so there's a type bonus on a Wyvern. Flyer. So doubles have +10 avoid. So that's interesting. I don't know that it's super useful. The doubles tend to have decent avoid though, and if they can avoid tank even a little bit better, they could potentially survive longer and waste more enemy turns. So that's okay. I don't know that I would want to run Lyn. You could run Lyn on a flyer, but I feel like most of the good flying units are very fast. The only flyer who I would recommend running Lyn on is Ivy, just to fix up her speed. But that's really it. And then for Chi Adept, you also have the type bonus of Astra Storm breaking the target, which is somewhat interesting, but you have to consider you can only do this once per engage, and Chi Adept has better things to be using. That's another Chi Adept. Just going through all of my units really quick. All right, here's Covert. So Covert, you get range +10. So any Covert unit can greatly benefit from Lyn for sniping. Let's say there's a thief that just stole something you want. This is like the bread and butter use case for Astra, you know, thief sniping. Some people religiously run thieves or coverts, you know, like Sniper or, you know, Alchrist. So running this for the range +10 to snipe like a particular enemy is something that is commonly done. Honestly, I feel like this is a little overhyped. Some people overhype this. Like, you can do this, but I think running, I don't really like coverts personally. I feel like they're either so dodgy that enemies don't attack them, or they're within thresholds of getting one shot or two shot. And if enough things attack them, they will get one or two shot. So I would rather have physical tanks where I can control the damage better. So if like 5 enemies attack me for 2 damage, that's only 10 damage, I don't care. But if 5 enemies attack me with 10 or 15% hit rates and they deal 30 damage a hit and I have 40 health, I'm a little nervous about that, I'm not gonna lie. So, alright. Let's continue. Yeah, so Alchrist, you know, a lot of people like to run Alchrist on Lyn. Run Lyn on Alchrist. Run Alchrist on Lyn. Alright, so I think there's, let me just double check. Yeah, we have the Dragon, Covert, Chi Adept, Dragon, and Fly. Alright, that's all the type bonuses. As for good unit types, it's honestly very general. I think that Lyn specifically doesn't enable unique strategies. She just allows a unit to be faster, and she allows the unit to double more consistently, and she allows that unit to hit something twice before it counterattacks. And some people might argue, oh, it enables crit builds. It does. Like double, you know, you hit twice with the crit weapon. But if you build a unit correctly with like sword and lance power and upgrade your weapons and engrave them, you should be one-rounding things off of base damage alone, and you shouldn't need the crit. So that's why I'm not calling out like crit builds, because it's kind of irrelevant for the most part. Generally, crit builds throw out might on purpose for higher damage when they pop off. And there are other builds. Honestly, like Reprisal, like if you're running DLC, I feel like Reprisal is better than crit builds, because if you can just get high enough might, you can just smack things insanely hard with Reprisal. It's kind of like the crit. Like if you're running like a Wrath Vantage build, I feel like a Vantage Reprisal build would be similar on most units, potentially. So, I mean, that needs tested and confirmed, but I have a suspicion. But yeah, for good unit types, for good classes, I honestly wouldn't prioritize like running Dragon, Flying, Covert, or Chi Adept on Lyn. I would just prioritize putting it on a unit you want to be a hard damage carry who needs speed fixing. I think that's the best use case of Lyn. Let's go over Lyn's unlockable skills, where they are at in the overall metagame, in my opinion, where you should use them. All right, so the first line is the speed line, like speed +1, speed +2, and so on. The speed plus is very good. Speed +3 is very affordable, and generally speaking, can put a lot of your units at doubling thresholds or push them out of being doubled. So speed +3 for 500 SP. This is very affordable, even on no well runs of the game, and this was something I ran on pretty much most of my units that were combat units in my first and second playthroughs of Maddening before the well was introduced. So this is very affordable, very good. Now, if you want to scale it, it's pretty expensive. Getting to speed +4, you know, an extra 500 SP isn't so bad. You will need bond level 16, so you have to do the Paralog, and you have to spend a lot of fragments or do some kind of SP increase from using Lyn. And then speed +5, very expensive to get bond level 19. Costs you thousands of bond fragments, and it also costs you an extra 1k. Now, speed +5 is fantastic. Its availability is kind of questionable, though, in terms of bond fragments. If you do fishing, bond fragments aren't an issue. If you do fishing and you do the well, you can easily afford this. So, it is really good, though. But getting speed +3 to 4, I would say, is more reasonable in a playthrough. Speed Taker, you can get this early, so I'll actually show that. So you can get Speed Taker without doing her Paralog. This is very easy to get with the well. This is a fantastic ability. Some people argue that if you run too many of them, it's bad. This is true to some degree. I would say you should at most run like 3 to 4, maybe 5 Speed Takers at the most. A lot of the endgame maps do have a lot of enemies, and you only need 5 kills to max this out. And generally speaking, you don't need to max it out to double. So if you're at the same speed as the enemies, you just need like 3 kills. So you don't need the full 5. Speed Taker is very powerful, though. Now, you can run both, so if you have a very slow unit that you want to double, you can run both, but with the well, I would say you should run one or the other, and there's pros and cons to both. Speed Taker, is the same cost as speed plus 5, but it's only requirement level 5. So it's easier to get in terms of bond fragments, it's more affordable, and if you use it correctly, you will get plus 10 speed after getting 5 kills versus plus 5 speed. However, plus 5 speed is constant. You don't have to do anything for it, you just always have speed. So you can kind of run speed plus 5 on some units, you can run speed taker on some units. That's what I would recommend for a Maddening run. Alacrity, I don't think is worth investing in. I would say it's just a nice thing that Lyn gives you. I think there's way better passives for this game. I think it's just a waste. Now, if you want to run an Alacrity build, you can, but it's one of those things where if Alacrity is working, it's kind of like it's like a win more situation where your team comp already works and your build already works. You're just hitting something twice before it hits you back. But there's other ways of attacking, you know, so I don't find it valuable at all. It's just nice to have from Lyn for free. I wouldn't make a build around Alacrity personally, especially considering that it's 3k SP and you can get a lot of crazy things for 2 to 3k SP. So I don't recommend it. There are some people who run crit builds on it that are okay. Personally, I don't see the value. There's better crit builds in my opinion, but you can run it, it's decent. And then finally we have bow focus. So hit plus 30, you know, it's like hit plus on a bow. And, you know, with the downside of dodge minus 10, meaning you have 10% more incoming crit rates. Most bow users aren't getting smacked anyways. And it's only when using a bow, so if you switch off the bow or unequip it, you don't have that crit rate incoming. This can be good for improving accuracy of units who have bad hit rates, and it's basically a cheap, like, hit plus, you know, 10 to 20 or 10 to 30. It's much cheaper than hit plus 10 to 30, but it only works on bows. So if you have a unit who just want to be a dedicated archer, this can be good on them. So it's situational, but I would say speed taker and speed plus are the best. Alacrity is situational, bow focus is situational. So what does the engraving do? Now this is an interesting engraving. It's definitely not one of the best ones, but it's one of the early crit engravings you get. It improves hit by 40 and crit by 20. It also reduces weight by 2, but it reduces might by 3. So this can be really good on weapons with high might, like smash weapons for the hit improvements. The weight reduction can also help so you don't get doubled. Some smash weapons are actually surprisingly light. So like the silver great lance and the silver great sword, the silver blade are surprisingly light. So you can wield them without getting doubled, but then you counterattack with a huge hit. This improves your hit rates and gives you some crit chance. You can also run this on crit weapons. So any killer weapon or any weapon you want to improve its crit rate on for crit builds. The minus 3 might though is very painful on crit builds. That's effectively, you know, 9 less damage per crit you're getting, because each point of might on a crit weapon is 3 damage. So losing 9 damage hurts, especially if you're doubling. And especially if you're struggling to deal any damage, which can be the case on like some crit sword builds or Wadows and stuff like this. But I would use this for hit increase on strong, like high might weapons, for crit damage, you know, for crit builds, or for weight reduction, and specifically weight reduction on things with high might. Because losing 3 points of might, it doesn't hurt as bad on like axes and on lances. It's still pretty painful, but it's not as bad. But like axes and like heavy smash weapons, I would say, are what this wants to go on, or crit weapons, like a killer axe maybe. I do think there are better things for killer axe though. You know, like fates, for example. So if you're running some like Panette crit build, getting 30 crit instead of 20, you also get avoid and you get crit avoid, and you just lose 2 points of damage instead of 3. This just seems to be better in my opinion for crit specifically. There's also Erica, which does increase incoming crit and reduces avoid, but you get accuracy crit with no reduction to might. So that's the trade-off there. So if you're running a build that can tank, you have like holdout or something, this is the best for keeping the damage up. This is the best for improving the crit rate. And this is kind of like a mixed bag of hit increase, crit, weight reduction, but also a huge hit to might. So yeah, that's it for Lyn. Overall, very strong emblem, a lot of utility, can do quite a bit for a team, can basically make any unit able to double unless it's like ungodly slow. But yeah, definitely like and subscribe if you enjoyed this or found this useful. Feel free to drop a comment as to how you run Lyn, and I'll see you in the future.